cheer. To climates unknown did courageously steer. Through oceans to deserts for freedom they came, and dying bequeathed us their freedom and fame. In freedom we're born, and in freedom we live. Our purses are ready, steady, friends, steady. Not as slaves, but as free men, our money will give.
So Doug has got a really interesting program for you. Just a little housekeeping when we go to see his presentation. We're going to go out that door and down the hall. The bathrooms are the last two doors on the left when you're going up the hall, and feel free to avail yourself of those anytime you need to. And I think that's all I've got to say. So Doug, take it from here, my friend.
Thank you. How dare you shake your hand?
Ooh, he did it.
Okay, where's the Purell?
I already did the Purell.
Oh, see, I don't need to.
What kind of slug do you think I am?
Clearly very conscientious. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Doug Ulwick. I'm the president of the Historical Society of Old Abington. It's December 1st, 2024, and we are on a field trip today. We are at the Trinity Episcopal Church in Rockland, and the conversation is entitled The Church Within and the Church Without. And for those of you who saw the building on the outside and then walked inside and went, oh my goodness, yes, it's bigger on the inside, isn't it? Like
it is the TARDIS.
The TARDIS, I like that.
For all you nerds.
Science fiction fans, that's a line from Doctor Who. But anyway, before we get much further, we always start our presentations, our conversations, our programs with a salute to the flag, and I see there's one in the back corner here over near the organ. So those who are willing and able, if you'll join me in the salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So, how many in my audience belong to this church? First of all, show of hands. Not a huge turnout today, but okay.
They're all in a collation.
Well, that's true. Okay, I should explain that too. We had wanted to do this program a year ago, and I said, let's do it. And at the time, I got the feedback that their historian, Karen, her husband, was ill. Could we wait? And I said, yeah, of course. So we'll do it next year. This, of course, is also the anniversary, the end of the anniversary year, 150th anniversary year for the town of Rockland. I thought, what a great way to end it, is to come here and do that. And then we discovered within the past 10 days or so, Karen's husband died. So suddenly my cohort in doing all of this wasn't going to be there available for us. And Sarah said, I'll do it. And I said, okay, perfect, sounds good. And then she lost her voice. It was like everything was going wrong. And I said, maybe we should put this off for a week. And she's, no. So I applaud the church and everyone involved in it for soldiering on through some difficult circumstances and still being able to welcome us here today. Anyway, so again, this is one of the more unusual buildings because the inside doesn't match the outside. We're going to talk about that. I have my regular PowerPoint presentation that we will put on. We'll be doing that in the parish hall at the end of the corridor. So in a minute, I'm going to ask you to relocate there and we'll finish there. But I wanted to start in here so you could get a sense of the space, so you could get a sense of what was created for this congregation. They have been very bold a couple of times in their history, probably many times in their history, but certainly when it comes to architecture. And we're going to explore that as to how some of that came about and the architects that helped them do what they did and shared their vision, or shared a vision, as to whose vision it was, might be a little up in the air at times, but it's very interesting nonetheless. So that's kind of a fun aspect of this that I'll want to share with you. And several people, knowing we were going to be in a church and knowing there was a pipe organ, said, are you going to play? And I said, oh, sure, why not? So anyway, the organ's a little bit out of tune. I discovered in my research that it is a pipe organ that is not listed with the Pipe Organ Historical Society, but I'm going to fix that. Well, they listed it, they listed who made it, but they don't list much about what else goes on with it. So I said, okay. And I gathered some information today, and I'll update their page about it. But it was rebuilt from a Hutchings organ. There's a Hutching over at Channing Church, as I recall. Am I right with that? And it's a combination of electrical and manual, and all sorts of funky things happen. What's very unusual about it is there's 0 volume control on this one. Most pipe organs have the pipes for the upper keyboard in a big box with what looks like a Venetian blind on the front and a pedal called a swell shade. And the keyboard is the swell, and to get volume control, when you push down on the pedal like an accelerator in a car, it opens the Venetian blind, you get more sound. When you bring it back, it closes it down, you get less sound. This doesn't have that. And I sit at it, my foot goes for that pedal, and it's not there. So you have to get a little more creative for how you adjust the volume. I'm not going to adjust the volume, I'm just going to play it loud. So anyway.
That's what stops are for, though. That's what stops are for.
And they call it stops for a reason, but I never stop. Anyway.
And
So,
for the record, the organ is made of several different organs.
okay. It's primarily a Hutchings, but
Right,
things
but
came
this is why we
together.
call it the Franken organ.
Franken organ, I like that, like Frankenstein organ.
The
Okay.
Franken.
Okay. Anyway, so unto us a child is born as interpreted by Gordon Young. Now that's kind of fun because it's a traditional piece in a very contemporary setting. Feel familiar? And yes, I'm walking around barefoot because it's much easier to play the pedals that way. After that big announcement, I left that music book in the other room, so we'll do Hark the Herald Angels Sing. It's called Winging It. Glorious noise. So anyway, are there any questions about the space we're in while we're in it? Though you can come back and see it later. Yes?
The difference is at the windows.
The original building that the architect created had no lower windows. The light came from on high. His attitude apparently was there's nothing to see around here. If you look around the neighborhood, there kind of isn't. So he didn't care about that. He wanted to bring in the light on high. And he did the same in the Hanover Church, pretty much. It seemed to be a philosophy of his. But when the church had its colonial shell added, colonial windows were added too. And I think the chandeliers as well. I don't remember those. They're not very contemporary. Again, it was a choice to colonial it up a bit. And it's a different appearance than it would have had. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I remember it from before the colonialism of it.
Right.
But I don't remember seeing the windows being this drastic a difference.
Yeah, and they're on primarily the south side. The north side is
Right.
less changed.
Yeah.
Just the one to the back, but the end is still without. And
So
again,
the second architect decided there was something to see.
I think it was as much what it would look like from the outside. Really, not so much what we see, what they see.
Right.
So
And
it was,
probably also a lot of what we could see,
Yeah.
now that we have light coming in. Which before, we didn't really have light coming in.
it changed the whole nature of it.
Yes.
Okay. So let's adjourn to the other end of the complex and make yourselves comfortable. There's a projection screen set up there so you can see where it is you need to see. But let's head down to the parish hall. Thank you for joining me here, and I look forward to reconvening over there. Thank you. So welcome back. We're now reassembled in the parish hall, and we're going to talk a little bit about how all of this came about. And again, the title of the conversation is Church Without and the Church Within. Now, Episcopalian coming to Abington, Rockland, and Whitman. I'm sorry, this is probably a little small to see. This is a map of the three towns. And we had the Whitman Church on Park Avenue. We date that to 1910, and my date had said 1922 for this church. I've seen a date of incorporation 1920, but roughly 10 years later, though they were meeting here before that. But in this building, I've seen dated to this building, the main building, which we'll talk about, to about 1911. Now, in the scheme of things, in timeline for when churches came to Rockland, back before Rockland was Rockland, the first Congregational Church in Abington was set up in 1711. The third Congregational Church of Abington, which later became Rockland, was 1813. They were the second church to break away from the mother church. The Baptists came in Rockland by 1886, and actually the Abington Church was a mission church to that one. The Unitarians hit Rockland in 1889, Holy Family for the Catholics, 1882. We had two different Methodist churches, Hatherley, which you might be familiar with at the far end of town, heading up towards Weymouth, was established in 1870. It closed in 2008. Lesser known is out behind Rockland Credit Union was the Franklin Avenue Methodist Church. That closed in 1904 and at some point became a Christian Science reading room. We are sitting in the facilities of the new kids on the block, the Episcopal Church in 1920 or 22, depending upon which source you're looking at. Why so late? And Episcopalian in this country, Sarah, it really is an offshoot of the Church of England, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so the whole invention of it, the Pilgrims, and we all said goodbye to England, but,
Well, it wasn't
we like their religion.
The Pilgrims were not Anglican.
No.
No, it became a difficulty during the Revolutionary War, of course, when we were still, basically pledging allegiance to King, and that wasn't really quite the thing to do because the King was no longer in charge. So some of them had to close, some of them kind of rebranded, if you will.
Yes, I like that.
And I think Christ Church Quincy is the oldest one in Massachusetts, the oldest Episcopal church that rebranded to become an Episcopal church as opposed to Anglican at that time.
Okay.
Yeah, so we were there.
Perfect. And I think like a lot of these religions coming in, it was a population that brought it with them. In the written history of the church, it's mentioned that there was an attempt from some, I believe, weavers around 1900 who attempted to establish a church here, and they didn't. They just moved on. So finally, the first roots of this particular congregation date back to about 1911. But again, people coming here interested in establishing the religion and finally doing so. Now, this is a relatively large complex. We are in the parish hall. When you came through from the sanctuary at the back here, this, is my understanding, was the original building. And now it is the kitchen and the front hallway here, the stairs down. But at one point, that was the whole church. Later, all of this got added on, and later, all of this got changed. But I just kind of want you to get a sense of the spaces that you're looking at here. Again, the original building, and this was taken in the spring of 1923. You can still recognize this building, the arrangement of 3 windows. They're now a different breakup of the glass, if you will, and the front vestibule has been enclosed or unenclosed, but it gives you a sense. Notice also there's a building up here, and I haven't done the deed research, but at some point I'm sorry, that's the interior of that building. I believe the history tells us, it refers to it as the A-frame, and says it was designed by Lou Eister. Anyway, a very traditional arrangement. This was December of 1966. So it had been well in use for a period of time before this color photo was taken. And nothing particularly unusual about it, very utilitarian. But no, I'm jumping not to where I wanted to be. But the next additions came to this building with this wing over here. And that became the RE wing, if I recall. Is that right?
That was the parish hall and kitchen.
Downstairs. Okay, but it extended from the original building.
Right underneath us.
Right underneath us. Okay. So that was an early addition. This is that house I was pointing to up the hill. And this was taken in December of 1960. And according to the signage, it was Trinity Church Educational Center. This building would not be long for this world by 1960, because this was torn down, or moved, I think it was torn down, to make room for the new church. So bye-bye this building. The brave leap they made was to hire an architect with some very different ideas about what a church should be. And we're seeing the model. We think it still exists somewhere in the building, but this is a photograph, which fortunately we do have, of the building, and it shows exactly how ambitious the plan was. It wasn't just to build a church, it was to build more than a church. It was to build a church and redo the hall and everything else. This is the work of Joseph Schiffer, and this is the phase 1 that finally did get executed. This is the part, a version of the part in between, and this was his revision for the parish hall and the existing buildings that we are now in. Obviously that part never happened, but this part did. How is it different from the traditional notion of a church? Any thoughts? Anyone want to share a reaction to this? That what are you seeing of that part on the right-hand side?
Cement?
It's not cement, it's all wood actually, which is interesting, but I can see where you would get that from the shapes. A lot of the buildings at the time would have had those precast forms. Marilyn?
No steeple.
No steeple, good point. Absolutely not. And the other thing that it doesn't have are traditional windows down below. All of the light is brought in up through these high towers on flat roofs. And it was said at the time, and I think there's some validity to it, considering where it was, there was nothing to look at. You know, and having been brought up in the Catholic tradition where we had stained glass windows, we never saw outside. We just got a lot of light in, but we never could see through. More traditional churches, I'll just mention United Church of Christ in Abington, for instance. Glass windows, you can see outside. You know, you are surrounded by whatever, but you're aware of the outside. This did not do that. Also, what happens when you put windows up high and nothing down low? It raises the eye. Again, something we've always, traditionally, something that we strive to do in churches. I wanted to point out, because a lot of people don't know this, Schiffer at the same time was designing the Lutheran Church of the Cross in Hanover on Route 139, roughly across from the bowling alley, if you know where that is, up in the woods. If you haven't driven up there, take a drive up there, because this is another one of his works. Like this church, it's also church in the round, without the corners removed. I mean, literally, it's like a big oval. And it's laid out with a concrete base, a layer of glass around the top, and then this shallow roof that suddenly goes vertical with a center spire. Now, their roof leaked too. Anyone who's familiar with this building knows it was a constant problem. And the reason being, it was a two-part vertical shaft with glass down the middle and skylight on top, and all the glass leaked. They ultimately capped it off. But other than that, that church is very much the way it was when it was built. They have not redone it. This was an entirely new building. There was no existing hall to adapt to or anything. And there's a wing off behind where we're looking here, a single-story lower wing, which always looked like it needed a second story. And I did actually explore that option with them at one time. There's a date on this, Department of Public Safety Plan Review from 1965. We think that both of the buildings date to 67, but this indicates the Lutheran Church might be a smidge early. But nonetheless, it's a contemporary, it's by the same architect, and you can still go see it. This is the contemporary Trinity under construction. So we see the scaffolding, and we see the vertical walls starting to take place. We see these overhangs in the top that framed windows, high windows. And in the back, we see the original church building, which was the parish hall at the time. This is dated May of 1967. Can you imagine this landing in Rockland? You know, it was a surprise. And of course, on the road to the high school, everyone was seeing it get built. This is the completion by November of 1967. The vertical boarding, the windows, again, the original church building over here, the connector piece. Now, none of what was proposed in that model beyond happened. This was the grand scheme, and this is as far as it got. There were different things from what you see now, which I think we'll get into as we talk. But again, what was there to look at? You know, the backside of the bank, you know, and parking lots and whatever. So the vision was to raise the eye, to bring the light in high. And it made for an interesting composition, and again, very bold. And I applaud the congregation for daring to do this. There are lines, I think Danny Howland quoted one to me that what happened around Rockland. When are you going to unwrap the church? Take it out of the box. Take it out of the packing crate. And I can see that. I mean, yeah, okay, it kind of looks like an interesting packing crate there. Another angle of it, and they did manage to put a cross up on the tower there. But it's a very imposing presence, no doubt about it, and very unusual for the time and space. Not terribly, if I can editorialize here, not terribly welcoming, and I think that became an issue over the years. It wasn't what people expected. It wasn't what they were used to. It wasn't what they were necessarily comfortable with. But this is November, again, of 67. How many remember this building? Show of hands? It's pretty good. Okay. Were you surprised when you first saw it? A little shocking, maybe? Mm-hmm. It's not what we got to see in Rockland, or Abington, or Whitman. Anyway, this appears in a publication along with the other one, The Structure of Praise by Arthur Masmanian. I have a copy. And there are some good images. This is one of them, but it shows, again, the brutal style of architecture, but the forms, the stepping up boxes, the overhangs, and this is the back side of it from the bank parking lot. Interesting views, interesting take on it, and it merited national publication apparently. But then, the notion was, let's change it. And again, I applaud the congregation for being bold, for saying, this isn't working for us. This isn't working for us on several levels. One, the roofs leak. And with flat roofs, it's always a problem. It's a maintenance issue. It's an architectural detailing issue. It's hard to not make flat roofs leak, particularly when they come up against a vertical wall, which this one did. So the church decided to hire another architect by the name of Otis Hawthorne. Now, he had just done locally the Foursquare Church up on Spring Street here in Rockland. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's kind of contemporary, but kind of traditional in other ways. And so he had done some work locally. There was an interesting connection in that Otis, actually Joseph Schiffer, who designed the contemporary building, at one point worked for Otis Hawthorne's father. Interesting. But Boston Globe architectural critic Robert Campbell got his hands on this story and was frankly appalled.
Yes.
And wrote this article. It was not kind. He said they made a mistake in the first place, and if they follow through with this, they're gonna make another mistake. And he never did a follow-up to this piece, but it's a fascinating piece on his take on a congregation that was giving up on contemporary architecture and imposing a colonial shell over it. And that was the plan, to come in and build something on top of, over and around, and give it a more traditional sense. How does that work? Tricky is how that works. And the Mariner was kinder to it and interviewed the minister and talked about why and how it was going to happen and how they were getting pricing. But this was Otis Hawthorne's image about what should happen here. And again, he didn't limit his work here, he kept going. And that's where everyone always runs out of money when they're going to keep going. They get the money to do the church. But when it comes to finishing phase B and phase C, yeah, maybe not. And it's always tough to stay on top of these things. Congregations have difficulty with it, and we understand why. This was the process where they took the building, they cut back on these big overhangs that stuck out, and we're seeing back the original wall and windows, and they stripped off the siding on the lower portion of the front and reframed it to take some fairly traditional windows. Then they took the flat roofs and put angled roofs on top of them, and they built the steeple actually on the ground and hoisted it up into place and set it back on top, the crowning glory on top of the whole building. These weren't the only changes they made, but this, you've just seen this, I took this about a week or so ago. This is the sanctuary. Stained glass window introduced here on the east side, up behind the altar. And we're seeing now some of these colonial windows creeping in. We're seeing colonial candelabras, which I don't believe were part of the original design. And the other thing that we could not have taken, this picture, back originally, there was no center aisle. That seemed radical perhaps at the time. It wasn't. Actually, a lot of the colonial churches had no center aisle. They had side aisles instead. Yes, Cinda.
When my daughter got married, she had to go down the side aisle, and that was very different.
And you had just actually said what everyone wanted, a center aisle, you know, for the bride to walk down. But it wasn't necessarily traditional. The United Church of Christ in Abington didn't have a center aisle. They added one. Now, a lot of churches did. There are still a few that don't have it. I'm thinking off the top of my head, Churchill Methodist Church in Norwell, no center aisle. You go down one, and the way the brides do it is they go down one and come back the other. Kind of works, actually, when you think about it. But anyway, can you think of any other churches still in the area that don't have center aisles? See? It's kind of happened. It was a thing. It was a thing that we need a center aisle. But this church didn't have it. And also, instead of really church truly in the round, and this is something that they were, this is also, I got another shot to show the verticality of it all, because that's one thing that survived from the contemporary church. It's a very vertical space, and it draws your eye upward. Not as much as before when there was light coming in up there, but nonetheless, it's something that draws the eye upward, which was part of the original intent, which has survived. But here is what makes this church not really in the round. We have a north transept and the south transept, the south overlooking Goddard Ave, with the windows on the two levels, the colonial chandelier in the middle. But here's the north. And you know, they added a stained glass window, they added a colonial here, but not as much. There's no turning the corner. You're either left, right, or center. And church in the round would be just that. You'd have the seating all the way around. And the Lutheran Church of the Cross in Hanover does that. So the same architect created church fully in the round there. Here it's sectional. There are 3 sections for general seating, and behind the altar is designed for where the choir is supposed to sit. So it was handled in that way. And so a lot of things didn't change, a lot of things had to change. And you folks heard me play the pipe organ a little earlier. It was created by Raymond Whalen. He has since passed. In 2006, I did some research online. There is, not surprisingly I suppose, a Pipe Organ Historical Society. And this is like their entire listing right here. I will add to it, and we'll kind of flesh out this whole thing. Dan Howland, who is with us, knew a lot more about the instrument, and it primarily came from an instrument by the Hutchings Organ Company. There are a lot of those around in various forms, but it was rebuilt, added to, altered, and mechanically changed to be the instrument you heard today. The church is working to raise money to fix it, restore it, tune it, and I applaud their efforts in that. There aren't many pipe organs left around. Channing has one, Holy Family has one, this church has one. Who else? Any other pipe organs left in Rockland? There was one up at Hatherley. I don't know if it's still there.
Congregational, do they still have it?
Yeah, congregational. I think it's still there. I don't know if anyone plays it.
I think it's still there.
That population that's populating the building, I think most of their music's electronic. But that was actually a hook in Hastings that was rebuilt. I played that one for some time. Anyway, but they're few and far between. They're very expensive to maintain. They're very delightful, but they're an expensive hobby, to put it mildly. And I love to find them. I love to play them when I do find them. Anyway, so we're learning more about who did it, how he did it, and we'll document that better through the national database. So we'll be part of that too. Anyway, this is the composition that we now see today, taken on a bright, sunny, clear summer day with leaves on the trees and everything else. But we see the original tower. I don't believe they cut it off. I think they just added a cap to it and divided it up. They took these sides that had extensions, U-shaped extensions, and cut those back and did that to them to get the pitched roofs. When Campbell was doing his review, he really didn't like these windows up here. They're crushed Palladian windows, and the proportions are a bit off. But the overall composition, I think, did what the congregation wanted to do. it looked more traditional. It looked like a church. It has a steeple. It has a cross on the steeple. And it has an obvious relationship to the church hall. Remember, that was the church when they started 100 years ago. That's what they had. They've done a lot in 100 years, haven't they? They've been through a lot of adventures in the 100 years, and I'm sure there are more adventures to come. But what they have is a handicapped accessible shell. They have a fascinating space that I think many can find very inspiring. And they keep after it. When I was setting up today, there was a crew up front planning on rebuilding the front steps to this wing. So there's a care for the building moving onward and keeping it safe and keeping it usable for the congregation. So we have great hope moving forward. Anyway, any other thoughts, Sarah, that things I haven't covered that we should consider?
Not necessarily. I mean, like I pointed out before, let me take this off so I can sort of hear.
Hold your breath. We're good.
Stop breathing.
Just kidding.
If you go out, and I think I saw our cameraman doing it, but if you go out in the backyard, whereas you can see on the front here, it's been, all painted, and we just put these new windows in because we had big giant plexiglass windows for a while that, were just plexiglass, so it was chilly.
No insulation.
Zero insulation. When it rained, when it was windy, you could hear a rattling. So those got replaced by these nice windows and these little top windows. But behind this, in the back of the yard, you can see exactly what the old building looked like because they didn't change it. You can see all the brown, you can see the overhangs. It's exactly the same as it was before they changed it. They just didn't bother to change the back. So that's interesting. And the other thing that we have, or that we don't have now, that we did before, was the water feature inside the building. There was a charming water feature. I think
it was unplanned.
Unplanned, and once I think it rained on the bishop, so that's awkward.
They brought out an umbrella. The story
I don't know
goes.
what they did, but yeah, so they must have brought it because it rained in the church. It was really, really bad. So we no longer have a water feature per se in the church most of the time. But yeah.
I think I saw a bucket in there somewhere.
There was a little pan
Okay.
there. But that actually, that leak hasn't happened in a while.
It hasn't
Well,
rained.
we haven't had rain.
Well, that's
Right. But it's funny because it comes down right here inside the church through where the chandelier comes, and only when it's rainy and windy in a certain direction. So it's not all the time.
These louvers are losing their
I know,
paint.
I know.
That might have something to do with
It
it.
is, and we want to get up there, but we need a cherry picker to do it. We can't seem to get a cherry picker.
Okay.
And they won't let me go up there anyway, so.
I'd protest.
I did, I would
Real
go up
power
there, that
here.
looks so cool. I would go up there in a heartbeat.
Better you than me.
Here I am ready to climb a ladder. My poor brother just broke his leg climbing a ladder. And I was like, I'll get up.
Please no. Anyway, so we're hoping at some point, we understand the model is still around, but that'd be fun to compare like what the model looked like on the back versus what the reality was here. So we go finding clues wherever we can. The other thing I'll share with you is till a week ago, I had like none of these images and working through. And Sarah said, we've got some photos somewhere. And there are two presentation boards back over near where the door where you came in. They loaned those to me. And I opened them up, I scanned, and had suddenly a wealth of information to share with you today. So I'm very grateful that that information came forward. But part of history is that there's always more information coming forward. I know Cinda said that she had found other photographs of right there, you were sitting back there, sorry. Another photograph of the building as it was, when it was new. So yeah. There's more stuff out there, and we at the Historical Society are always interested in any of this material because it adds to our knowledge base of the three towns. We had precious little on this building. That's changed. So I love doing programs like this where we learn so much, and hopefully you've learned something as well today about how this all came to be. And so let's first see if there are any questions for either the rector or myself before we talk about what happens next. What? We answered every single question before it was asked? Is that good? No, Molly?
I don't know if it's any interest, but there are two things. The Episcopalian Church in Whitman, when you look at it and the original church here,
They look a lot alike, don't
very
they?
similar, and it would be interesting to compare the two as to how the parishes change. But the other thing that I think that is very interesting about this church is out of all of the churches in town, the Catholic Church certainly had the school and everything else, but this church was really open to the community when I first moved here, which was back in the dark ages. But the Dove's Nest School, which is up now across from Holy Family, it started in this room.
Okay.
And Rita Janey, who used to be very involved, and some of us here will remember her, she used to have all kinds of things for the elders in this particular room before we had a senior center. She was a very active member of the community. So she would bring in, she had a bowling group for women. And it was, like 100 women once a week would go bowling down at Gas Diaz. And then that would be like Tuesday, and then on Wednesday they would be here for exercise. And she constantly, I think you had some very active members of the community who were involved in this church.
So community outreach has always been huge.
Very big. At least I think so.
I think that leads to success, to get that involvement.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people that were involved in other churches were heavily involved in this church, basically because of a lot of the things that were done here.
Because of the programs offered.
Yeah.
That wouldn't surprise me. For the listeners, particularly on cable, we're just one day after the annual Rockland Holiday Stroll, and this building was open for it, and my understanding was when it got a little colder and a little darker, people came seeking out a place to warm up and have some refreshments.
And this is also where we've done, for a while we did a live nativity, and we had an actual Holy Family, and we went down the hall into the church, and we had an actual baby and all the rest. It's very difficult. It's a lot of work, and so we've kind of pared that down because a lot of people who used to do the work, we've got a very one today, and so that we've done. So we've changed it a little bit. What we do have, and what I encourage you all to look at while you're here, is a nativity display. So you've got nativities from all around the world, and then we did have the Holy Family in their little stable. This is Mary from last night. Thank you, Mary. So we still do that because the holiday stroll is a lot of fun. It's a lot of that, but the real Christmas, what Christmas is really all about, is what we're here for. And we share real Christmas, even though it's not even Advent yet. Well, it is now.
It is now, today.
It is now. Today
See,
is
December 1st, as of today. So, but we don't necessarily need to greet Santa Claus and Rudolph
Not
and
here.
Frosty the Snowman.
And I believe. I'm a believer, but not here, not.
Okay, a time and a place. Absolutely. Abington Celebrates will be doing that actually on the weekend of the 13th through the 15th. And I personally will be leading a concert at United Church of Christ in Abington on the 15th, Sunday the 15th, from 3 to 4, roughly in the afternoon. I like doing them candlelight, which would have been 4 to 5. But the crew said, no, we don't want people out in the dark. Okay, I buy it. So it won't be a candlelight concert, but it will be handbells, it will be the Abington Town Christmas Choir. Someone's twisted my arm into perhaps playing the harp a little bit, so I'll probably be doing that. And the pipe organ, and a little bit of audience participation in some favorite Christmas hymns, frankly. Along with trumpet accompanying that as well. So we're pulling together what I think will be an interesting concert on that date, and hopefully you folks can join us. Other things upcoming, we are, Historical Society of Old Abington, taking off a few months. We used to take off just January and start back up in February, and then the storms knocked us out a few times. In fact, for the program we were doing on the Congregational Church here in Rockland, I think we had to postpone it twice because of weather. So we learned from that. And now we do our fall semester, which is October, November, December, finishing up with this. And we'll pick up again for our spring semester of conversations, which will be March, April, and May. March, we are still working on our revived essay, essay art and whatever contest. What am I leaving out, Marilyn? Video, thank you, okay. I don't know who said it, but that's right. Eileen, okay. Anyway, it used to be just an essay contest sponsored in memory of the late historian and author Martha Campbell. And the committee has recently revamped it to include essays, remembrances, videos, and this year for the first time art, which I'm going to be fascinated to see how that works. And offering not just one prize, but two. I think we're still doing two. One for adults and the other for students, high school students. High school students. Anyway, so we'll see how that goes, but the deadline, I believe, is going to be the end of January, and then they will actually award the prize at our meeting the first Sunday in March. The other thing that's happening next year is Rockland, I'm sorry, he's going to step out of the limelight for just a little bit because this coming year is Whitman's 150th anniversary year. Of course, they originally broke away as South Abington and changed their name later. Like we did earlier this year for Rockland, we are planning on having two different conversations. The first one is about the secession. What happened? How did they break away? When did they break away? How messy was it? And then the second is establishing the new town. Just saying, okay, now we're South Abington. What does that mean? How do you do that? And honestly, Whitman did it very differently from how Rockland did it. So it's going to be an interesting contrast. And just even talking about scheduling, we thought Whitman was going to break away first, but no, Rockland broke away first. So we'll talk about all of that. And there's a very active committee in Whitman now working on it. We're even in conversations about maybe doing two field trips and doing both of our programs at Whitman Town Hall. If you're familiar with the building, it's pretty stunning. And that would be a nice location to do it. So between now and next semester, we will figure all of that out. But it promises to be an interesting year for us with those, and we'll follow through. And maybe we'll find ourselves at the Episcopal Church in Whitman next year, because there are a lot of similarities, as has been pointed out, to their still building and the first building here. On the surface, they look a lot alike. They added on very differently and did something very different, and their church is still their church. They didn't add a church to their church. They added a hall and other facilities, but a very active congregation there too. Okay, so we have refreshments, which will probably take a minute to lay out up in the back. You're welcome to hang out and ask questions. I hear a question.
Where do you find your information? I was looking around to find information about what...
Research in general?
No, just of what you have scheduled.
We have a Facebook page.
For people that don't do Facebook.
People who don't do Facebook. You can get on our email list, and we do have a very active email list and try to update there.
Okay.
We also have a postcard mailing we do to membership. Membership in the Historical Society of Old Abington is $20 a year or $100 for a lifetime. It's kind of our only source of income. So we encourage people to do that as well. But that guarantees you that you will be up to date on everything we're doing, even if you're not on Facebook.
Right.
So we try, so we have 3 ways of reaching people: Facebook, postcards, and email. And that's it for now. We're working on a web page. So. And for those who aren't familiar, we are based in the Dyer Memorial Library building on Center Ave in Abington. They are going through a lot of changes. They have a new director, and they have expanded their hours. They're now Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday from 11 to 3. That's an improvement from 1 day a week by appointment only if we're in the mood. So we're much happier at some of the changes. And they have, during the Abington Celebrates weekend coming up, an estate sale and an auction. Is there anything you want to say about Eileen while you're here?
Actually, I have Abington Celebrates papers here that give everything, but on the Saturday of Abington Celebrates weekend, which would be the 14th, from 9 to 3, the Dyer will be open. If you're not interested in the estate sale or the auction, that's fine. We will be doing tours of the Dyer on the half hour, and we have some special exhibits set up in the back room, but we also are selling off things that have nothing to do with Abington, Rockland, Whitman, but just were added to the Dyer over the last 90 years or whatever it's been. Portraits of George Washington, engravings of Lincoln, and since neither actually was here, we can use the money, and because the Dyer is a private non-profit. It is run on trusts and donations. We can't have membership dues because Marietta Dyer in her will said we could not. So in order to, we just had a roof fixed. Luckily, we got a nice grant from Abington Community Preservation Act, but it's hard to keep up going. So the estate sale, so that we can clean out some of the place, organize our materials, be able to find them easier for people. But you're welcome to come up. It's a very interesting place. It's a beautiful, beautiful building. And it's always just been well, it was the public library in the back for a while, but it was built specifically to be a historical library, research library.
Right. A very great resource from the South Shore. It's known for a lot of genealogical research. If you're not familiar with that, and if that's something that interests you, the Dyer is the place to go. So kind of a nice thing. It's a wonderful resource, and again, the Historical Society is based there as well. And we normally have our meetings there, but every now and then we step out like we did today, and it's been delightful. So thank you to our hosts.
Just a quick note, some of your tables have little cards on them. There we go. Some of your tables have little cards. Those are, it's two-sided. One side is to let you know that next week in this very space, we're going to have a craft fair. So if you're looking to do some Christmas shopping and you want to support local artisans, this is the place to be. We'll also be raffling off this nativity and these two nativity plates. I don't know what would you call these? I don't know, things.
Yes.
Nativity things. We'll be auctioning those off by raffle.
They're treasures.
Next week.
Yes.
They are treasures.
They're treasures.
They really are gorgeous. So you're welcome to come along to that, and then on the other side is our Christmas Eve and Christmas Day and lessons and carols. So everyone's always welcome to come to Trinity.
Perfect.
And for the record, if you need it or if you know someone that does, all of our major services are ASL interpreted for the deaf community.
Cool.
So we have an interpreter here all the time.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to probably take a minute. We have cookies, we have cider, we have eggnog, we have hot cider, okay, provided by the church. That was nice. And we have seltzer water. Anyway, so give us a minute to get some.